today we are here, and I am going to enjoy this entire episode that we have, which is going to be fantastic. And I'm just loving life. I'm loving my co-host over here. We get to enjoy, a little bit of what he calls the Independence Day. So we're going to talk about a little bit about Independence Day, as the 4th of July is right on top of us. But we want to have a candid conversation because I think this is so intriguing about what is really happening in the U.S. Virgin Islands from a financial platform perspective. I think I every time I hear about it, I talk about it to myself, and it's very, very intriguing. And I want to make sure the audience truly understands what it is that we're talking about and why this is so important for our discussion. So first, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, Grant, great to see you. Happy to be here. Chris Principe, publisher of Financial IT, and excited about this week for just the reasons that you said. 4th of July. It really is one of my favorite holidays. I got to tell you, because I'm an explosive guy. I love that fireworks. I love that nationalism. I love that, yeah, go America. And, this is the time for it. This is the day. This is the big day. I mean, my second favorite holiday, or maybe it goes between the two, is Halloween because, I like candy and chocolate and dressing up. So Grant, how are we this week, and how are we going to work in these two topics? Because I do want to speak a little bit about 4th of July. It's just such a monumentous occasion.
It's about our here now. Here's a good segue into this because one of the founding fathers of the United States and the U.S., the Constitution and the financial system was actually, manifested by Alexander Hamilton. A lot of people don't maybe know that. Today's world, like, hey, isn't that the guy that has this beautiful play out there on Broadway and all this stuff and has made a lot of acclaim? But he was a real person, and he was an adult in the St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, right? And then he, traveled to Washington and got really involved with George Washington. But he was the actual father of what we call today our financial system and how it works. And there's some uniqueness still today around the U.S. Virgin Islands and what it's able to do that other regions, other territories, other places just don't have. So that's your segue for how we're going to blow up, today's 4th of July celebration here on The Big Picture.
Well, I'll tell you, Grant, you are a mastermind, because that's a segue that I didn't even think about it until you just brought it up. And it is a perfect one. So let's talk about that a little bit, because Mr. $10 bill, he's our guy today, right? He's part of 4th of July. He's part of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and he is the father of the financial system. And one interesting fact about him too, besides the fact that there's this amazing play on Broadway, which really everyone should go see, which has now brought him back into some of the spotlight, rather than him not being really somebody that's so visible. This gave him great visibility because he's really a pivotal man in our history of the United States. But what's interesting too is that, yes, he spent quite a bit of time in the U.S. Virgin Islands. There's a number of historic sites where he was at, this kind of thing. But in New York City, up in Harlem, is a museum that is Alexander Hamilton's house. And I've actually had the opportunity
to know that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Just a small little fact there that a lot of people, and well worth visiting. If you do get to New York, it's a nice trip uptown, and to be able to go to one of the truly great figures in our history, especially our financial histories, home up in Harlem, Manhattan, New York City.
Man, so here we go. So we got our history lesson today, right? And it's a little bit more, and we're going to make history. So people say SETI case. They hear Grant talk about SETI case. Like, what is SETI case? The SETI case is the St. Croix Economic Development Initiative and Caribbean American Single Economy. So I want to know from your lens, what does that mean when you hear that? And I don't want you to put on your financial IT hat. When you hear me talk about the St. Croix Economic Development Initiative and the Caribbean American single economy, what does that tell you?
Well, Grant, for me, it right away brings the crossroads of the U.S. to the Caribbean. And the U.S. Virgin Islands, with its a great and amazing history that it has, as being not part of the U.S. proper, it's a territory, but it has special accommodations that no place else has. Not only that, at the strategic point, there's physical abilities there that no place has. And it should be and can be, and I predict will be, the focal point for the growth in the Caribbean.
So let's unpack that, because people don't understand that. They say, okay, I hear you're saying, but what exactly does that mean? And a lot of times it's what we call first. I'll just unpack this first thing: the third border. People like the third border. What do you mean? The U.S. Virgin Islands is a third border. I don't understand that. Well, what I mean by that is that in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is a territory of the United States, it has, when it was acquired from the Dutch, I think in 1917, that it afforded certain legal protections and some credibilities that people just don't have. Meaning, from a shipping and logistics standpoint, you can actually, it's a U.S. law that a foreign ship can only dock or port in the United States one time, only one time, and then it has to go back to this whole process all over again. Whereas utilizing the U.S. Virgin Islands, you can actually dock in the U.S. Virgin Islands, do whatever business you're doing, and then continue on into the U.S. without having to go back through this process. And if Chris, now, do you understand that, how much that actually means to a business because of all the transactional and all the millions of dollars that go into having to redock and all that type of thing? Let's just unpack that one advantage first as we go through the rest of them.
Yeah, and Grant, it is a really important advantage. And let me put it in a little bit more simple terms for people what this means, that a ship can only dock once in a U.S. port. If you think to the airline industry, right? In the airline industry, most countries, the U.S. included for a long time, allowed planes to fly into one city. But then, like, for instance, you can fly into JFK, New York, which years ago was the prime place and the U.S.'s largest airport. It's been passed now, of course, by Atlanta for many years. But you'd fly into JFK, and you were not allowed to fly from JFK to Chicago, or JFK down to New Orleans, or JFK to Los Angeles. Okay, you are only allowed to come to one particular location. And same with the U.S. planes. U.S. planes generally could only go point to point, from here to Paris, from here to Frankfurt, but not from here to Frankfurt to Moscow, right? So this is the same thing in the shipping industry. Ships can come through the Panama Canal and go to the Port of the Everglades in Florida, go to the ports of Houston in Texas, right? Go up the coast all the way up to Teaneck, New Jersey, where you have the New York City port. So there they have to unload their cargo and then move on. So what were the reasons for doing this? And one of the biggest reasons for doing this was to protect the domestic shipping routes and the domestic air traffic routes, right, from outside competitors and these kind of things. And this was the reason that this structure was put into place. And like I said, this is not a U.S. policy only. This goes throughout the world. Almost every country does this kind of thing to protect their domestic industries and transportation lines, right? So this is something that's been going on for a long time. The uniqueness of the U.S. Virgin Islands is that when a ship stops there, it is a U.S. port, okay, but can still continue on to other U.S. ports, okay, and that's what makes some of the difference. Now, when we talk about the third border, right, it's interesting because it also includes, remember, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth; it's not a territory, so there's some administrational differences, I would say. But there are some unique things that Puerto Rico is allowed to do, but there's much more unique things that the U.S. Virgin Islands has the ability and capability of doing. And if we go back a few decades, the main shipping point from the U.S. to the Caribbean and even South America was Puerto Rico. And there was a big barge traffic that used to go on. That has disappeared, over the last 20 years for a lot of different reasons. In my view, in my opinion, some of those things are changes that the government of Puerto Rico made that really turned off businesses. I'll give you one example from a good 15, 20 years ago. The pharmaceutical industry was one of the prominent employers in Puerto Rico. There was a number of big pharmaceutical plants down there because the laws made it and the tax situation made it very attractive for them versus being in the mainland U.S. Now, we had on the political side, we had somebody come in that was the governor of Puerto Rico who decided that, we should put the taxes on these pharmaceutical places so we can get more money. And what happened practically overnight, Grant, all those pharmaceutical industries closed up and moved out. And there isn't any now. So this is the kind of thing that, you have to think about and look at, that when you have a benefit, you have to exploit it. You have to make the best of it. You have to take as much advantage of it as you can. Right. So I only offer the Puerto Rico example as what we don't want to see happen in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have some great benefits here that should and need to be and are being planned to be fully taken advantage of.
No, without question, and everyone needs to know these things because your particular situation is what you want to look at, especially when again it comes to shipping and logistics. That you can now serve both the American mainland and then also the Caribbean and the archipelago, and utilizing St. Croix as a major port, and because you can do that, and you may not be aware of that, that's very, very important. Now, there was new legislation that was passed, a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. Virgin Islands and also CARICOM. If people don't know who CARICOM is, that is the EU or the European Union, as they call that. Well, this is the Caribbean Union of all the other Caribbean nations, in which the United States did not have a seat at, right? Because of this MOU, now we are because we have a presence in the Caribbean through the U.S. Virgin Islands, but now this gives us an opportunity. Now, why is that important? Because in the Caribbean, the banking system can be somewhat taxing because of where it sits and how it is supported, and there was a lot of risk there. Now, so because of this new memorandum, now you have access to U.S. banking laws or different incentives that were not available before, because now you have U.S. jurisdiction, you have offshore benefits. This gives you legal protections and credibility, and and without that becomes more of a burden. And then people in the U.S. like, hey, I don't want to do business in the Caribbean because I'm just not sure the banking system is going to be as secure. That goes away. So now investors can gain access to U.S. courts, U.S. banking, dollar nominated or assets, and that becomes a launching point for the U.S. to be a major player in the Caribbean market, as well as Asian markets and other markets as well. I want to get your take on that. Put on your investor hat. How do you see this being a major change in policy that you could take advantage of?
Well, Grant, a couple of things. First, memorandum of understanding is not actually a law, okay? Right? This is an intention to have a better understanding, right? To have to progress to something where we can actually put it together in agreement, right? In most cases, all the terms of a memorandum of understanding flood over into the finalized agreement, and we're not at that point yet, and hopefully we will be soon. But if you want me to put my financial cap on, my investor cap on, it's easy. 3 words, Grant, 3 words: confidence, security, and trust. That's what it brings to you. That's what the Virgin Islands can bring to the Caribbean through the backing of the U.S.
Well, let's continue along those lines, because that makes a big difference, especially when it comes to money, right? You want to have confidence in that money is going to go somewhere. Then you got to look at the power of the U.S. dollar as it looks like in the Caribbean. It has a lot of buying power. So I would also turn it to what we call opportunity zones and then hub zones, right? Much of St. Croix is designated as an opportunity zone. So that provides capital gains tax deferrals, some potential exclusions for investors who place funds into some qualifying projects that might be taking place either in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, or elsewhere, right? And then St. Croix also qualifies under hub zone programs that is backed by the U.S. government, which can give companies a competitive edge when bidding on U.S. federal contracts. These are things that we need to be aware of when we're looking at opportunities in the Virgin Islands that maybe they weren't, to your point, they weren't confident about doing because of the risk factor. So we want to de-risk these opportunities as much as possible. Would you agree with that, or what would you like to add?
Grant, I think you brought up some really great points, and what it drives home for me is that we've seen the evolution in the U.S. Virgin Islands of a number of really core programs, strong programs with big benefits. What, to me, in my view, seems to be missing is, better promotion of those programs, better use of those programs. It seems like a great secret that's been kept. And we really need to get out of here. I think if companies in the U.S. really understand, what the benefit is, that we'd see more use of these programs. I think if companies and the countries themselves in the Caribbean understand the benefits, we would see much more activity there. And you've heard me before, Grant. When it comes to CARICOM, I think it's a good organization that's very necessary to bring the Caribbean together. The CARICOM agreement itself is so outdated. We're talking from the 90s. It existed and was put into place before the internet was even used, right? But by general people and by business, right? So it's missing it so dramatically needs an upgrade and an update. And my hope would be that the U.S. Virgin Islands could be one of the drivers and the center points for that, and that the U.S. would be more than passively involved.
Well, now you got it. Now we bring it back to Independence Day. Let's get some independence. Let's get some new freedoms that can occur. Utilize all these different financial vehicles and programs to our advantage and bring prosperity to St. Croix, prosperity to the Virgin Islands. I am all for that, and that is what I am working toward. We're going to take a small break, and then when we come back, we're going to unpack even more incentives and programs and things that are taking place that islanders as well as U.S. mainland and everybody in the world can take advantage of. And we want to make sure that everybody, before you go over to St. Thomas, you go to St. John, you're coming to St. Croix, and you're bringing dollars and cents to us. So we'll take a break, and then we'll come right back.
Case Efficacy Chain, also known as Chain of Efficacy, a digital chain. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Educate, efficiency, effectiveness, and evolve. So whether you are doing market research, studying, doing market analysis, or making a critical financial decision, get the latest breaking, developing market news in the cryptocurrency markets at www.efficacycoin.com. Efficacy Cryptocurrency News is powered by Case Capital Markets.
Reimagine a world where the Caribbean is seamlessly connected, where our people, our cultures, and our economies move freely across the islands. This is Connect Caribbean, more than a ferry service. It's the heartbeat of a new era, an era where economic opportunities expand, where trade flows freely across our seas, and cultural exchange flourishes. We are linking businesses, empowering communities, and reigniting the hope for a truly integrated Caribbean. Together, we're shaping a brighter, more unified future for the Caribbean. Connect Caribbean, connecting our islands, our people, our future.
TravelShare. It Marketplace is an innovative, dynamic, user-friendly, and fully comprehensive global travel marketplace, featuring all Caribbean islands as a premier destinations. TravelShare. It Marketplace featured daily travel news, arts, culture, events, travel weather news, individuals' remote work, flex time, paid time off, family leisure time, and travel deals to better connect the U.S., Caribbean, and the Americas worldwide. So no matter where you want to travel in the world for work or leisure, working remotely or on vacation by yourself, with friends or family, whether by air or sea, TravelShare. It Marketplace makes it easy to get you to your destination. Book now at www.travelshare.com.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, RTV.network.
All right, we are back. This is back. I'm glad we're having this discussion. And then if I didn't say it the first time, I'm definitely going to say it this time. I want to say happy Independence Day, happy 4th of July to everybody out in our audience. Have a very safe and wonderful holiday. Look at this guy. He's swinging it out there, right. And so in the spirit of financial freedom, right, and the forefather of Alexander Hamilton, we're unpacking some of the uniqueness of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and specifically in St. Croix and what SETI Case is doing on the island to create new opportunities, to create the financial center within St. Croix to be the linchpin between the American economy and the Caribbean economy, That's, that's what CASE really stands for, and really building that out from the St. Croix perspective. Now, I want to my buddy over here, Chris, who he knows, he's my guru, the all things known in finance and IT. There are unique tax incentives, Chris. Specifically, and I don't people don't know this, there's IRC Section 934 in the EDC program. And what is that? Now, the USVI offers Economic Development Commission Program, or EDC, which can reduce, I've told, up to 90% of corporate income tax liability for qualifying companies that are domiciled in St. Croix that can benefit from these exemptions or reductions in their gross receipts, some of their property taxes, and the like. Can you unpack for us why this is such an incentive and why this is important for people to know?
Well, I mean, Grant, it's pretty simple. Whether it's your business or personally, anytime you pay less taxes, everyone thinks it's a good thing, and it is. Okay, so that's the start of it. So where does that really lead to? So being able to open up your company down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, open up a subsidiary down there, means that you can move things to those balance sheets and reduce your tax exposure and your tax liability. And if you're a company where you have a lot of assets, for instance, it becomes a very strong financial move, because saving on your taxes goes right to your bottom line profit, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your business made $1 million profit, and now you're able to reduce your taxes, and we'll use the number that you called out, Grant, because it's a great one, 90% reduction on the tax that you might pay for the against those assets, right? And generally, your assets are taxed at the capital gains rate. So capital gains rate is generally 30%, thereabouts, on the amount of increased value that asset might have obtained during the last year, right? So it could be a tidy sum, and being able to reduce that is a big advantage. And I think it's an advantage that is not well known. I think it's an advantage that in the tax industry, our accountants in general, and most accounting firms, especially the U.S. ones, are really, they're excellent for U.S. taxes, U.S. tax laws, working with the IRS or against the IRS, whichever one you happen to choose. But they're much less familiar with what advantages can be brought outside the borders. And the U.S. Virgin Islands is an excellent example of what that can be. And it's like I pointed out with Puerto Rico, when the tax advantages were there, the industry came down. When the tax advantages disappeared, the industry left. We've also had a similar thing in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and we'll go back to one of the big advantages, which is the trans-shipping that we talked about. So anytime you can draw a shipping business to your city, your port, right, it's an increase in the business that you wouldn't have any other way. So in other words, it's not just that you have more ships coming there. Those more ships create on-the-ground jobs.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as those ships stop coming, those jobs just disappear. The example that we'll use here is on St. Croix. For decades, there was the primary oil refinery in the Caribbean. Okay, next to Trinidad, which does refining also. But once that refinery closed, and it closed for a number of reasons, those jobs are just lost. There was no place to make those jobs up. There was no place to make up the money that was brought down from there. Now, I'm really pleased to hear that there's a lot of talk about remodernizing, starting this up again, and it would be, and even if they just were to focus on as a storage facility, it would be a huge advantage to the Caribbean to have that facility up and running. And when you talk about St. Croix, you look at a natural deep water harbor in close proximity to an airport with some of the largest runway that we have in the region. Okay, so there, if some of these things that are being done and being taken advantage of in terms of the shipping side, if those things really develop, and then we throw in another benefit, which you very correctly brought up, the third border, right? So the third border means, the U.S. looking to push the border beyond, let's say, the 48 states, right? So when we talk about immigration, when we talk about customs clearance, when we're talking about transshipment of goods, that's where they want to bring the third border, so that the idea from, and I think I would give the credit to the State Department and the military of the U.S. for going into this plan, is to bring things like money laundering, terrorism, human trafficking, illegal immigration, all these kind of things to stop it before it even reaches any of the U.S. States proper, right? So that in itself highlights even more this natural deep water harbor. And why, Grant? You might say, why? Well, here's why. Because to do anything in the Caribbean in terms of security, you need a naval presence. Okay? Yep. The further you can move out your ability to operate, the stronger your presence is. So St. Croix Harbor is a natural for maintenance of ships, for refueling, resupplying of ships, for the harboring of ships, both for the U.S. Navy as well as the U.S. Coast Guard. And that in itself, again, brings business to the area that's never been there before. And once you put that kind of infrastructure in, you're looking at business that's going to continue and will grow over the years. So it becomes so critical that we look at these maritime things as really, I kind of think of it as the car that's pulling the trailer along. This will be the where we get a lot of the movement, and I would hope that this would also give us a lot of visibility to highlight how attractive that this area in the U.S. Virgin Islands is, as well as the Caribbean region.
No, 100%. And I want to get some context of what we're talking about here. Right now, these are approximate numbers, but about, I think around $4 billion flows through the U.S. Virgin Islands from offshore companies because of its unique tax incentive structure, right? So through the EDC program, qualifying businesses do receive up to 90% reduction of corporate taxes, meaning only 10% is retained locally and paid to the U.S. VI government under special arrangements. That's a big number. We're talking $4 billion. Why would they do that? Well, Chris just kind of told us why they would do that. And this is why you got some big financial services firms, insurance firms, investment funds. They all route some profits through subsidiaries in St. Croix, in St. Thomas, and St. John. Now, all this is perfectly legal. It's definitely monitored by the IRS. But long as they are domiciled correctly, they match all the different requirements that are there, this is perfectly legal. So the government takes about 10%, and the rest of that money goes offshore. Now, herein is the problem, is that billions of dollars are then funneled through the U.S. Virgin Islands, but none of the mainland people get that money. There's some of the public sector gets some of it, but the private sector does not. So they're not doing business with the businesses on St. Croix itself. Herein lies the problem, and this is what we're looking to do from a SETI case perspective. Like, hey, don't just come utilize this loophole and then the money flows back out. No, there are viable businesses here that can actually help to even create more profitability for everyone in general. So that's why we're looking to do business with organizations, and I'm on the SETI case board, the advisory board, so people did not know that.
Yeah.
And because St. Croix is a historic heritage center. I don't think people knew that, Chris, right?
And Grant, you've outlined some of the real goals and some of the things that are really obtainable. But, there's much more here that we need to go into. Let's take a break and let's come back and let's really jump into this.
Okay, sounds.
The internet doesn't come to your phone from satellites. It comes from the ocean floor. Beneath the crashing waves and silent currents lie hundreds of thousands of miles of fiber optic cables, thinner than a garden hose, yet they carry 99% of all international data. Stretching across continents, these undersea lifelines connect the world. From New York to London, Tokyo to Sydney, signals of light pulse through glass strands buried as deep as 8,000 meters below the surface, far deeper than the Titanic's final resting place. They're laid with surgical precision by massive cable-laying ships, often for months at a time, mapping routes that dodge mountains, trenches, and geopolitical tensions. Shielded against pressure, corrosion, and even shark bites, these cables are maintained by deep-sea repair teams and robotic submersibles. When damage strikes, by anchors, earthquakes, or sabotage, every second counts. Data travels as beams of light, bouncing through cores thinner than a human hair, reaching speeds near that of light itself. In a blink, a message from Tokyo can reach London, crossing oceans through this hidden web. We scroll, stream, and connect, unaware that the real internet doesn't float in the sky. It's buried in the dark silence of the sea.
In today's fast-paced financial landscape, access to capital is the key to success. At the heart of this revolution is Case Capital Markets, powered by SETI Case. Here, innovation and investment converge, creating a dynamic environment where businesses can thrive and reach new heights. Introducing Grant McGaw, the Senior Advisor at Case Capital Markets. Grant is a visionary leader, dedicated to connecting businesses with institutional capital and strategic funding. His expertise opens doors to game-changing investment opportunities, making him an invaluable partner for companies looking to scale and succeed in the competitive world of finance. With an impressive 25 years in technology, 9 years in healthcare, and 6 years in investment banking, Grant McGaw has a proven track record. He has successfully closed over $500 million in high-value transactions, seamlessly bridging technology, healthcare, and infrastructure with innovative financial solutions. His experience is a testament to his ability to drive success. Case Capital Markets offers businesses direct access to over 32,000 venture capital firms, private equity funds, family offices, and institutional investors. This network empowers mid-market companies with under $100 million in revenue to scale beyond their limits, unlocking unprecedented growth potential. Debt, equity, growth capital, public offerings. These are the building blocks of the future of capital access. Whether you're scaling a business, seeking investment, or exploring market expansion, Grant McGaw is your trusted partner. Together, you can unlock capital and create long-term financial success. The future belongs to those who take action. Are you ready to elevate your business?
SETI Case Efficacy Chain, also known as Chain of Efficacy, a digital chain. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. educate, efficiency, effectiveness, and evolve. So whether you are doing market research, studying, doing market analysis, or making a critical financial decision, get the latest breaking, developing market news in the cryptocurrency markets at www.efficacycoin.com. Efficacy Cryptocurrency News is powered by Case Capital Markets.
And we are back. Now, we're about to get into juicy discussion. I already know these finance and banking guys, they like to talk about money. There's no doubt about it. Look at Chris and that giant smile. So, Chris, let's come back. Before we went to break, we're about to unpack a little bit more of that. Tell us more about what you feel about the incentives that could take place in St. Croix.
Well, I think it's really interesting is that there hasn't been a focus on those incentives in a long time. A lot of those incentives have been in place. I think it's a credit to the current administration that has pushed forward. I think some of these initiatives, especially earlier on in the administration, and I think that just the initiatives like SETI and CASE. I mean, this has gone a long way to giving visibility, to giving the rhyme and reason and the structure around what can happen and what does go on, and what we can benefit out of all these things. And I'd like to go back to one thing that you said before the break, which is, you mentioned the figure of $3 billion in benefits right now, right? And to me, while it's a great number, it should be 30 billion. I mean, easily should be 30 billion. If you look at what the benefits are and you look at the value, and there is huge value there. If you look at that value, companies should be breaking the doors down here and saying, hey, we want to benefit from some of this. And to me, it again comes back to, just not enough information, visibility, promotion of these things. And yeah, it's difficult. I mean, Grant, I would tell you that in the financial space, especially, the world of Wall Street, it's highly competitive, right?
Yes.
And one thing we do know about Wall Street and St. Croix and the U.S. Virgin Islands in general is a lot of these big hotshots on Wall Street have their second homes down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? And they do that because there's no travel restriction, no passport requirement, nothing like that at all. You're protected by U.S. laws, courts, structure, right? So it becomes a great opportunity for these people to have a home away from home for those times when they need it. And I guess when some of them are making the kind of money they are, that they probably need it more often. And they should. But they're not like spreading that around. It's almost like they want to keep it a secret, Grant. And that, yeah,
we got to stop that. That's why we're talking about this now, and specific to SETI case and looking to and actually going through the process of building out a modern merchant banking financial system right there in St. Croix, right? And we're talking about Frederiksted, right? So a lot of people are familiar. There's a port. There's people, they park their cruise ships right outside the offices. where SETI case is located, right? So this is very, very important to understand as we build out this heart, that we can begin to reshape what private equity, venture capital, and private credit can look like. And people coming in and say, hey, you know what? If I'm a principal investor, an advisor, and I'm looking at companies from 3 million to say 100 million, and they need growth capital, they need to recapitalize, let's say, or they're doing a pre-IPO. Here's another opportunity. We're going to be building out a merchant bank, our own stock exchange there as well, with investment banking capabilities. Why is that important? Active deal making, right? We do our own deals. Principal co-investing with all these people that are already there, and now hey, we can diversify it and start siphoning off that 3 to 4 billion. And to your point, if it grows to 30, 40 billion, which it should, right, because of what it brings to the table, we can start doing deal origination, which is great. Full compliance with SEC frameworks, taking advantage of the U.S. banking principles. This is also very important. So now you have an onshore deal room, because that's where we're at. We have back office operations can operate throughout the entire Caribbean, the entire archipelago. This is how we start to rethink and reshape and start looking at how we can do this differently, right? So as it turns out with SETI case, as a premier U.S. anchored merchant banking hub in the Caribbean and Latin America, it's going to be a place for institutional capital, local opportunity, and global markets that can converge and drive true economic prosperity for all of the U.S. Virgin Islands and St. Croix in the Americas and Latin America. So this is big if we leverage it and position it correctly. I know we only got a few minutes here, so I'm going to hand it back over to you to close this out.
Well, Grant, I just want to touch upon one of the things that you said that for me kind of strikes home. You said companies between 3 and 100 million, and I would suggest that really the target should be companies between 100 million and $1 billion. And here's why: the $3 to $100 million, particularly the $3 to $50 billion size companies, generally are family-run businesses. They're generally companies that have a specific product, not a broad-based product. They're generally companies that have built their business based on where they're located regionally, as regional businesses. And look, we know very well that in the U.S., that export is not a key thing for U.S. companies. The domestic market in the U.S. is so big, so great that you almost export by chance. While, for instance, if I build a factory in France, I have to know I'm going to export at least 50%, otherwise the factory is not viable, because the French market is not enough to support that business. So to me, that makes that a difficult target, because there's a lot of reasons why those people are not going to really move from where they are, what they're doing, and take a risk in their view and a chance to be domiciled and located in some place they're not familiar with, even though it has all the benefits of the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. But those bigger companies, to me, those are the companies, first of all, because of their size and 100 million to $1 billion. If they get a 1% benefit, it's $1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, right away, it's something that any executive in the finance suite would take a look at and would be interested in seeing. The other thing that I want to mention too, Grant, is that there are some great resources in the U.S. Virgin Islands themselves to help companies make this transition easy and smooth. Okay, there's people to advise you. There's accounting firms to do this. There's the legal structure to be able to help you. And we need those people to reach out more, but we need people to also look at them. And if you're a company of size that's listening to us right now, pick up the phone, send an email, and reach out to some of these people. So, Grant, I want to end up with just a quick question to you, because you've got great experience on the investment side. You guys have built the funds and these. What in the U.S. Virgin Islands would specifically attract you or give you the ammunition to talk to somebody else about?
I'd have to, this is unique in my particular case. I am very, very much so an advocate for minority businesses. And when I say that, I don't think there's a lot of awareness in the United States for minority businesses and understanding what the opportunity is in the Virgin Islands and with a friendly government entity. This is important to understand. And to your point, if you can start getting even the larger investors to get involved, and then so now you've got, still like you said, let's open the framework from 3 million to 100 million. Let's go to 100 million to $1 billion, right? So now you got the whole gamut, and that you can start utilizing a framework. And this little tiny island of St. Croix should be the creme de la creme, because of what it offers so much to so many people from a financial standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, for everything that it says. People don't realize this and don't even know this, that when President Biden signed the infrastructure bill, he did so in St. Croix. And because he did so in St. Croix, it became a heritage historical site, right? One of the few in the United States. I think there's only like 50 to 60 of these. There's a lot of uniqueness in the U.S. and specifically in St. Croix that people just don't know that can be taken advantage of. Did you know that one of the largest fiber optic cable management systems in the world are in St. Croix, that was built out, some years ago by Cable and Wireless? It's bigger than Silicon Valley. It's sitting right there, underutilized. So you've got a technological platform. You've got a financial platform. You've got cultural incentives. And you ask me, why do I need to keep going?
Well, I'll tell you, Grant, I mean, it's been a great show. This is a topic that we will definitely be hitting going forward in the future. I want to wish you a really happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day. And to everyone watching, have a great time, be with family, and live life.
Absolutely. Happy 4th of July, Chris, and everyone else.